Chains, Chapter 29. 2 days later, Sara had me go with her to the fish market. Her back was hurting her fierce. I was to carry the cod and halibut needed for the fish chowder. The market was crowded with folks whose cupboards had been cleaned out by the Christmas feasting, and Sara muttered rude things. Her growing discomfort had put her in a constant temper. The cod was easy enough to purchase, but stall after stall turned up no halibut. Sara insisted that haddock or catfish would not do, so we marched on. The air was thick with cries of stall owners promising the juiciest fish and the freshest fish, and fish fit for the king himself. Before dawn I had made the trip to the tea-water pump, but I had not dared visit the prison or Captain Morse's tavern. I was still confuddled about what to do. My thoughts wandered, but I did not realize that Sara had moved ahead of me in the crowd until a great shout went up. An oyster seller's cart overturned in front of the carp stall. The two men were hollering at each other. The crowd had halted, and I had no place to turn. Sara's white cloth cap bobbed away in the distance as I looked for a path out of the crowd, but bodies pushed from all sides to watch the two men arguing. When a hand grabbed my arm, I gasped. "Apologies, Giselle," Captain Morse said as he released me, but his eyes were tired and his cheeks were flushed. My mouth gaped open like a lad of a fish breathing its last. I shook my head. He couldn't talk to me in view of all. There was no mistaking what it was, dressed in that brown and white coat. I turned first one way and then the other, but bodies were packed around me as tight as could be. Morse kept his eyes on the arguing men, but leaned his face close enough to mine so I could hear him whisper, "We must talk." Sara must have realized that I was no longer with her. Her cab stopped and then slowly started back towards us. Her husband was a British gunner. If she saw me talking to the rebel officer— "Go away," I muttered. "I have news for my men." The oyster seller picked up a cart and shook it in the other man's face. The crowd laughed. Sara plowed towards me. "I beg you," Morris whispered, "please." Soldiers appeared on the edge of the crowd to restore order. "Come up to the tavern." Yes, I told the captain. "I'll come this afternoon. Now go away." The crowd melted under the eyes of the armed soldiers. A carp seller was explaining the ruckus to a sergeant, while the oyster seller reloaded his cart. Sara kicked the oysters out of her way as she approached. "Where in the name of all holy did you get to?" she asked me. "I was trapped in the crowd," I said. "I called out to you, but you could not hear me." She grunted and handed me a small fish with glassy eyes. "This will have to do. Halibut is rare as a hen's teeth today." I settled it into the basket atop of the fat cod and followed Sara as she headed away from the market. We walked in the silence for a few blocks, her concentrating on her huffing and puffing, and me trying to figure if I dared go up to the tavern. The sky promised more snow. How long would Dimon wait before reclaiming Curzon's hat and blanket? We crossed the street. "Miss Sara, ma'am," I asked, as sweet as honey. "What is it?" I chose my words with care. "Has Miss Lockton said anything about me in your hearing?" She tilted her head a bit, and she looked at me. This morn, matter of fact. She said you wasn't allowed to go to that blasted water pump. Said I should send one of the other girls, even though the sun not be up at that time o' day, even though the streets be covered with ice." Sara reached for my elbow as we trod upon the slick patch of cobblestones. "But I like getting out," I said, "and I don't mind the chore." We reached the stretch where ashes had been thrown onto the ice, and going was safer. I don't answer to her," Sara said as she released my arm. "I answer to the King's army, and I'd be right pleased if you kept fetching the water. It makes my life easier." She stopped and put her hands on her back, breathing heavily. Her baby belly was so big she could have loaded it into the wheelbarrow and pushed it in front of her. She caught me studying her and gave a quick smile. "The babe will come soon," she said. "It'll be such a joyous day," I said. "I'll keep getting the water, but what?" "Could you please not tell Madam?" Sara stretched to one side and winced. "What she don't know won't hurt her. It's not like she's up at that hour anyways." After the midday meal, I contrived to overturn the pitcher that held the tea water, dumping it on the floor. Clumsy dolt, Hannah scolded as she knelt to clean up with rags. Don't be looking at me to trudge up there and get more for her high mightiness, Mary said from a chair window. She squinted and sewed another stitch. I've got to hem these breeches before the lad fades. I'll run up and fetch it, I said. Double time, I promise. Sara gave me a good hard stare, sensing that she did not have an entire picture before her. It's your neck, she said, finally. Mind she don't see that you leave. I ran up to the Golden Hill Tavern, my raw blisters hurting with every step. Captain Morse was idling on the porch, smoking a pipe. He disappeared inside when he saw me, and was waiting in the alley when I reached it. Here, he handed me a loaf of bread. You made me come here for this? I asked. Take it to Dibbin, he said, fighting a smile. There's a note baked inside. A note? It contains wondrous news. He looked ready to jump out of his skin. Washington has beaten them. Sir? He clenched his fists and unclenched him. On Christmas night, the general, he led a surprise attack on Trenton, and he beat the Hessians, killed a handful, and took more than 900 prisoner. Are you sure? I thought someone had told him a falsehood. The British officers I knew were confident that the American army had fallen. Positively, he said with a grin. But won't that make the British mad? I asked. I truly hope so. I hope that the king is so upset that he jumps up and down on his crown. This war is not over, not by a long shot. I handed the bread back. I'll tell them the news, but I cannot pass the note. That could land me in jail. He shoved the loaf back at me. You are a serving girl delivering a tavern loaf to starving prisoners. You don't know about the note. But why is it necessary? The men need to see my signature to know that it's the truth. They have endured so much, Sal. Don't deprive them of this chance to celebrate. It will strengthen their spirits. I pulled up my hood of my cloak to hide my face as I approached the prison. The commons was filled with drilling soldiers, much more than usual. Their officers barked commands with urgency. The men marched grim, faced swords flapping against their legs, rifles bouncing on their shoulders. Perhaps the captain's news was indeed the truth. I hurried behind the building to the right window. I stood up on the tiptoes and squished the loaf through the bars. Dibbin's face appeared at the window. There's a note inside, I whispered. Tear into it carefully. I ran away before he could answer, willing my feet to move faster. I had walked a block south when the enormous roar erupted from the prison. Hundreds of throats cheering, hooting and hollering, hundreds of hands clapping and feet stomping with joy. The noise was such that folks stopped what they were doing and ran out of the doors to stare. The news had spread from prison as fast as it had spread from cell to cell. The rebels had attacked instead of running. The rebels had advanced instead of retreating. The rebels had won a battle. Folks could scarce credit it.